Oh my God.
This one, the two will be 50 cities. 50 cities.
For two?
Yeah, for two.
The question of whether transatlantic slavery has truly ended is a complex and multifaceted one. In fact, I think it's $1 million question. While the slave trade itself may have ceased, its legacy and effects are still present in many aspects of society, particularly in regions that were heavily impacted by colonialism and slave labor. Neocolonialism refers to the continued economic and political influence of former colonial powers over their former colonies or other regions.
Réunis au sein du Conseil national pour la sauvegarde de la patrie, CNSP, avons décidé de mettre fin au régime que vous connaissez.
Dr. Arikana Chihambori, the former permanent representative of the African Union to the United States and one of the continent's preeminent Pan-African voices, has waded into the conversation surrounding the causes of the recent coup in Niger and the way forward.
I see what's happening in Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea very differently. If you look at the previous coups, those were orchestrated by Western powers, majority, of course, orchestrated by France. They had their own intentions, in a few quite documented very well. The leaders were trying to do what was ultimately best for their people, and those leaders were assassinated. The difference between these coups are coups being led by our people. The people have spoken. The people now truly understand the issues. The people are standing up to say what has been going on is unfair, is unacceptable. It really just simply makes sense that something has got to give. There is a difference between the previous coups and these last 4 coups, especially the one in Niger. I actually, on a personal level, I feel uncomfortable even calling them coups. This is, you look at a situation where people are basically desperate, where they know they're rich in natural resources, and yet the majority of the people are extremely poor. How long can that situation be sustained before the people finally wake up and rise up? That is what's happening. And I would like to call what's happening in these 4 countries as an ideological realignment of their economic, of their political, of their social values. At some point, if you look at the situation with the former French colonies, before even a president comes to power, there are certain no-go areas that the president must not touch, because if you do, you may not live to see the end of the day. Areas like the military, areas like, of course, the finances and the reserves that must be deposited with the French treasury, areas of the natural resources. So if you are a president, an African president, who is coming to power, and you are told, as long as you stay away from discussions pertaining to their presence, military presence in the country, training of your military by France, equipping of your military by France, don't talk about the natural resources, whose the French companies have the first right of approval. Do not talk, and make sure you continue to deposit your bank reserves with the French central bank. If you avoid those areas, then you're free to run your country any which way you want. Now, what kind of a leader is that? What environment are you going to be occupying and managing and running your country with all those major areas of economic development no longer accessible to you?
Like all of French Africa, Francophone Africa, their currency is the French franc. They are required to keep 50% of their foreign currency reserves in the bank in France. They have themselves no gold, no uranium, very little electricity, very little economic development in Niger. But their product has made possible the wealth of the people of France, the country, the state of France, and many other places. So that's what imperialism is: going to other people's countries, stealing their things, putting lipstick on it if you can, and calling the other fellows exactly what you are yourself. The Alexander the Great story I told on Wednesday. How dare you terrorize these waters as a thief? And the thief answers, how dare you terrorize the whole world and call yourself an emperor?
France does not have any gold mining. Where does France gold come from? Of course, it comes from Africa. France, they don't produce petrol, but yet they are #1 to sell petrol all over Europe countries with total garage. Where does come this petrol? Of course, it comes from the African countries. France does not have coltan, yet they managed to invent electrical vehicles which have the rechargeable battery that you don't have to fill up your tank, instead only a rechargeable battery. Where does come this coltan? Of course, it came from Africa. To make the story short, France does not have any natural resource, but yet they are inventing, they are producing, they have become a powerful nation in the world with the mineral resource that they don't even produce.
Can you imagine the minerals of DRC combined with the minerals of South Africa and with a new currency based on the minerals? What we can do to the dollar if we become a United States of Africa? With our minerals alone, we can collapse the dollar. We can collapse the strong pound that is based on gold, yet they don't have a gold mine. So why do you allow such things?
It's ironical that you have a continent with the best natural resources of any others as of today, but they are being exploited for the sustenance of those who enslaved us and continue exploiting us, rather than being exploited for our own emancipation. Why? Because you have a leadership that does not recognize the degree of present-day enslavement, economic enslavement, and the necessity for emancipation.
What's needed is complete separation. France has got to get out of Africa, really, honestly. Enough is enough. To take $500 billion out of Africa, I mean, it is insanity of the highest order. In countries that are supposedly poor, and making those countries fund French education, French healthcare system, create jobs for French youth while we are struggling in our country. It's no longer sustainable. President Macron needs to wake up and smell the coffee. And the African youth are the ones he's going to have to deal with. The African youth are not taking it anymore. They want what belongs to them. Financial institutions, them too. If I had my way, all the African heads of states should stop paying back any loans that were given by IMF and World Bank. Those loans have been paid gazillion times over.
I've only got time to turn to the funniest story of the week. Joe Biden is currently holding a democracy summit in southern Africa. That's right, in the very place where the United States and the United Kingdom and France and all the other so-called West supported racist, apartheid, white supremacist states right up until the very end. Margaret Thatcher, I was there, saw her lips move, called Nelson Mandela a common terrorist. The United States took Mandela off the terrorist list in 2008, in the 18th year of his presidency of the Republic of South Africa. And I got to thinking when I saw a very harrowing picture posted by one of my friends on Twitter earlier this evening. It's a picture that deserves to be seen far more widely. You'll find it on my Twitter feed. It's a picture of the Congo's first Prime Minister, Patrice Lumumba, half naked, in shackles, being pushed down aircraft steps by a Belgian military officer after his overthrow in a coup organized and executed by Britain, Belgium, and the United States of America. The newly elected President Jack Kennedy knew nothing of this coup, and the CIA defied him, lied to him, and conducted this coup behind their new president's back. But it happened. The CIA, MI6, and the hated Belgian colonist government that was finally having to leave power took this fine man, probably the greatest of all African leaders, and murdered him. They then dismembered him. They then dissolved him in acid and sent one of his teeth back to Brussels for safekeeping, for DNA. It was only returned to the Congo last year. The West murdered Patrice Lumumba. The West helped keep Nelson Mandela in prison for 27 years, most of them on Devil's Island, Robben Island, in the dungeons of apartheid. The West supported racist apartheid rule in the very southern Africa. They're now holding a summit to tell Africans how important their democracy is. There's the picture of the hero Patrice Lumumba being led down the steps of that aircraft to his death, his dismemberment, and his dissolving in acid. You couldn't make it up. And they wonder why Africans are utterly unmoved at their pleas to reject China and Russia and embrace them instead. China never occupied a square inch of Africa. Russia never occupied a square inch of Africa. As a matter of fact, when the West was supporting apartheid and white supremacist rule in southern Africa, it was the Russians who were arming, financing, and providing the diplomatic skeleton, backbone for the worldwide activities of the anti-apartheid movement, of the movement for liberation in southern Africa. I have many times spoken at the Patrice Lumumba University for the Friendship of the Peoples. It's not in San Francisco, it's not in London, and it certainly isn't in Brussels. It's in Moscow, it's in Russia. I have been there, spoken there many times. Does that little vignette not explain something to you, the viewers, and the wider public about why the Africans will never hate Russia, will never hate China? China is building roads, railways, terminals, ports, harbors, infrastructure all over Africa. All the so-called West did was loot it and steal even the people of Africa themselves, chain them in the holds of ships, sailed them through the Middle Passage, tossing thousands of them overboard when they died as food for the sharks, and then those lucky enough to reach land, were placed as beasts of burden in chains as slaves. You want Africans to support you, Mr. Biden, Mr. Sunak, Miss von der Leyen, Mr. Borrell, the people you just described as the people of the jungle while you sat in your garden. How does your garden grow now, Mr. Borrell? Have you seen the streets of France?
When Southern Africa was on fire fighting the apartheid regime, the USA sided with the apartheid regime of South Africa. They did not side with the African people. They never supported the ANC. They labeled Mandela a terrorist, but today they exalt Mandela in all sorts of ways. SWAPO was a terrorist organization in Namibia. ZANLA and ZIPRA in Zimbabwe were terrorist organizations. They were not on our side. They were on the side of the oppressors of this continent. They participated in the killing of our leaders. The USA participated in the killing of Patrice Lumumba. The USA participated in the toppling of Kwame Nkrumah. The USA participated in the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi. The USA participated in so many coups on the African continent. China has never participated in any coup. China has never killed a single African. How many Africans had the USA killed?
Many African countries quietly actually support Russia. And they support Russia out of historical reasons. That at critical moments during the struggle for independence, it is the Russians who came out to support those who are fighting for independence. The Russians who are present in Congo, the Russians who are present during the struggle in South Africa, the Russians who are present in Mozambique, the Russians who are present in Angola, the Russians who are present in Guinea-Bissau, and therefore sentimentally Africans support Russia. But no matter who we support, my own view is that war has no eyes. The net effect is that those who are not responsible for the war end up suffering. And I hope that this war, once it's settled, will send a clear message also to the Western world that their hegemonic approach to world affairs must come to an end.
This is massive. Colonel Douglas McGregor says the people who've had their minerals stolen for years are saying enough is enough. Get out of my country.
The Africans are fed up with it. And so this is an example in Niger where a supposedly U.S.-backed government with a U.S.-trained military suddenly turned around and said, I think all of you white people need to get out of here. We've had it with you. Go away. Go, Europeans, leave.
I just want to leave you with this thought. The revolutionary government in Niger has just increased the price of uranium that it exports on the world market to 200 euros per kilogram. It was previously paying, or rather charging, 80 cents. The French were getting Niger's uranium for 80 cents per kilogram, and the world market price is 200 euros per kilogram, which is what little Macron will have to pay from now on. You see, it pays to stand up for your rights. That's what the people in Niger have done. It remains to be seen if the people in Nigeria will now do the same.
We'll get around to the uranium and gold part of this story in a moment, which is arguably the most important part of this story. But first, a story that no one's talking about is the massive pipeline that is nearly set to go online. Now, it starts in Nigeria. It flows through Niger on its way up into Europe.
mentioned the Trans-Saharan pipeline to pipe our gas to Europe. Why should we leave Russia to do the whole thing and continue to complain? We can do it. We need to take bold action confidently.
Chevron, the United States, have already invested $13 billion into this pipeline. And guess what, guys? After the Nord Stream pipeline destruction, Chevron stepped up production to get this up and running. Hey, we'll speed this up. We'll fast track this. And now the people of Niger are saying, wait a second. Why are we going to allow a pipeline to flow right through our country so Europe can have natural gas? You are doing nothing for us. You continue to steal from us. Sorry, no more pipeline. This is why Europe is terrified this morning. The United States already blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, put their own pipeline into action in Africa. Smart business move, right? We'll just blow up the competition. Imagine Walmart doing that to Target stores. Yeah, we're just going to blow up those stores. Now you got to shop at Walmart. And now Niger is saying, hey, sorry, you're not going to use our country to transport your natural gas into Europe. Get out of here. So Europe is facing catastrophe with no Nord Stream pipeline coming from Russia any longer. And now the threat of this pipeline being shut down through Africa. This was their salvation, this pipeline. And then add into it uranium and Europe's nuclear power. The United States gets over 50% of its uranium from Russia, despite all of the sanctions that the United States has placed against Russia. They left uranium off the list. I love this. I love that they chose to sanction every other thing, but they left uranium off the list because we need it so badly. We need it desperately. Why? The United States is so heavily dependent on Russia for uranium that Putin could literally flip a switch, literally destroy the American economy by turning off the lights. A major backup resource of uranium is Niger. The French, the United States, have been essentially stealing uranium from African countries for decades. And again, these countries are saying enough is enough. We are sovereign countries. Get out of here. We are going to keep our own minerals and make our own decisions. And Russia is giving them that option right now. We want you to keep your sovereignty. We want you to be an independent country, not a slave to the West. Listen to Africa Bureau Chief Musa Ibrahim explain how the people of Africa want to gain back their wealth, their minerals, stop giving it away to America and Europe.
What people want is to gain back their wealth, back their uranium, their gold, their iron, their phosphate, their oil, their gas. And this scares the West because this means the true democracy will take place in Africa when people actually own their own land and the wealth of Africa does not go untaxed, unsupervised from the mines in Niger to the banks of Paris and the financial sector in Britain.
And he's right. Niger's coup isn't happening in a vacuum. This isn't a singular event. They're now pushing back against this neocolonialism in a larger multipolar world, saying this unipolar order that America has ruled for many, many years, seeking to keep your boot on the people of Africa, is not going to stand anymore. Africans are seeking to regain their national sovereignty. Africa's saying, hey, we are rich in uranium, but we don't get to benefit from any of it because you steal it from us. We will enrich our own uranium, and we will sell it to you, and you'll pay us for it. No more theft. Africa is in the middle of a revolution right now.
Africa has been enjoying Chinese investment for quite some time. The West will tell you, this is dangerous. Africa doesn't know what they're doing. They're saying like, oh, these Africans, they don't understand financial products, really.
Right, you got to be scared of the Chinese because they're going to take over everything. They will own you. They will destroy your country. Meanwhile, isn't that exactly what the West is doing?
Right. Well, and also the West benefits from Chinese investments, but we're telling Africans they don't understand what they're doing. I don't think there's anything more racist than that. Like, sorry, you guys don't understand finance. You don't understand that when you're accepting this debt from China, you're really doing your country wrong. But China has been investing in Africa infrastructure for decades. For example, in the Congo, major roads were shelled and destroyed in 1997 by the Rwanda-Uganda-backed army. China repaired those roads in 2010. Now, why would they do that? Here is how Siddharth Kara explained it in his book called Cobalt Red about cobalt mines. in Congo. He says that China's dominance in Africa was established in 2000 when President Jiang Zemin proposed the creation of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation to facilitate Chinese investments in African countries. This relationship was billed as a win-win. The Chinese would build much-needed roads, dams, airports, bridges, mobile networks, and power plants across Africa, and in exchange, China would secure access to vital resources to support its growing economy. And that has continued. These roads were built.
First, a new bombshell poll published today shows that nearly half of the King's realms would vote to become republics if they had the chance. Caribbean countries cite colonial ties as the reason for wanting to part with the monarchy. And pretty disturbingly for King Charles, 10 of the 14 countries polled say they back the Sussexes, saying Meghan's treatment exposes racist views. It's ignited debate about whether King Charles should apologise for Britain's past sins, maybe even pay reparations. Would that make any difference? Or would it just fuel the fire of republicanism? Well, here with me now to debate this, the former royal butler to Princess Diana, Paul Burrell, the activist and organiser of Black Lives Matter protests, Iman Ayton, and the historian and royal author, Dr. Tessa Dunlop. Well, this will be a quiet debate, won't it? Well, you brought your earplugs, Paul.
I won't get a look in.
Paul, let me start with you. I've got a problem with this constant looking back in history, feeling guilty for stuff that none of us in this era actually did, and then having to say sorry for everything that we didn't do, and even now, apparently having to pay people today for stuff that happened to their ancestors many generations before. I don't really get what that achieves.
We should learn from lessons of the past. We can't change anything, and we should move forward. But the Queen's greatest achievement, his mother's greatest achievement, was the Commonwealth of countries. She was very proud of that. I think if you could beam her down now, she would say, my Commonwealth. That should survive intact into the King's reign. So he should do whatever he can. Now, bear in mind, I've known this man for a very long time. Yeah. He has a voice. And he will say what he feels.
Here's the real problem he's got. There's another voice yapping away about racism. Two voices. His son, Harry, and Harry's wife, Meghan, who for 3 years have branded the royal family a bunch of callous racists. That is now turning up in these polls because, understandably, frankly, black people in the Commonwealth around the world are going, whoa, really? They're racist, these people? And yet they haven't produced a shred of evidence for any of it.
You and I know the royal family are not racist. And you and I know that they pressed the racist button on the Oprah Winfrey show.
Yeah.
And they never apologised to the Queen.
Never.
She went to her grave thinking there was a racist in the royal family.
And after she died, they said...
What happened?
We
didn't say that, the press said
that. We didn't mean to say it was racism.
Why didn't you correct it, Harry? Why didn't you tell your...
Well, we know why, because it made them... They weaponise racism and mental health to make themselves extremely rich.
I totally...
All right, come on. This is my problem. This has always been my problem with this racism narrative that these two have spun without any evidence, is that people around the world, particularly people of colour, they believe it. And why wouldn't they believe it? They're hearing the first person who wasn't a white royal bride say they're racist, these people. So then the damage is palpable, it's tangible, and it will lead, I think, if we're not careful, to a load of these countries becoming republics and the beginning of the end of the monarchy.
Thank you for your soliloquy.
No, thank you.
All right, no problem. So first and foremost, my feelings on the royal family and racism are not predicated on Harry and Meghan's willingness to identify it. That's the difference between me and you. We are talking about a country that was built off of racism, and we are referring to the oldest institution in this country that started it all. So that's the first thing. In terms of why black people and many others feel the way that we do, well, the monarchy is a symbol of white supremacy. OK? White supremacy. That is the reason.
Why does it make any difference if King Charles says sorry? Or why does it make if he pays money? What difference does that make?
OK. So reparations...
How does that combat racism?
No, it actually does. So let me
The guy hasn't got a racist bone in his body. He's done more for racism than any public figure in the country. Why should he be paying for the sins of people hundreds of years ago?
OK, so can I finish?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So, the monarchy is a symbol of white supremacy, which is what black people have had to contend with for the last 400 years, notwithstanding the fact that Elizabeth, or every king and queen, from Elizabeth I...
You think the last late queen was a model of white supremacy?
Let me finish my point. You just asked me several questions. Let me finish my point.
Well, answer the question.
Right, I'm getting there, so just finish.
Well, hurry up.
Let me just finish, OK?
Hurry up.
So, every king and queen from Elizabeth I to William IV has supported and profited off of slavery. So this is about the fact that this country was built off of racism, and that's the
country
point.
also
Wait, hold on a
led...
second. This country
You can't just keep
stems
talking.
No, because I haven't even finished my point.
You
Piers.
can't just
keep
make
interrupting.
outlandish
You
statements
keep
about our royal family and
interrupting.
not expect me to jump in.
Piers, you keep interrupting. Can I finish my point?
This country also led the world out of slavery.
Okay, so can I finish my point?
A
Is that
long
right?
time ago.
Can I finish my point, please?
Yes.
Perfect.
But
So,
please finish it.
I will. No problem. Just be patient. So, every single king and queen from Elizabeth I to William IV over a 270-year
just
period
said this.
supported the enslavement of Africans and profited as a result. So it doesn't... It doesn't take any genius. Hold on a second. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that this country was built off of racism and it stems from white supremacy, all of which is directly attributed to the crown, slavery, and colonialism. To answer your point, let me finish my point.
Keep talking.
Piers, you keep interrupting.
Answer my question.
Let's have a conversation.
Answer my question.
Let's have a conversation.
We need mediation here, guys.
You spoke about slavery. Let me answer the point.
I asked you a specific question. Why should King Charles be either apologising for what happened centuries ago or paying money for it?
Okay, so what you're talking about is slavery. I'm not talking about slavery. Slavery can be traced back to Europe. The Greek slave trade, to be specific, in 400 BC, then the Roman Empire, and then we get to the Muslim conquest of 7th century.
And black people had slaves
So what
too,
we're talking about,
right?
exactly. So I'm not talking about
slavery comes in many forms.
I am not talking about
there is
slavery.
a lot of slavery around today.
So I'll tell you what I'm talking about. I'm talking about colonialism, neocolonialism, racism, racial disparities, and the racist system of oppression and exploitation of black people and white supremacist activities, which have been rebanded under the guise.
What's that got to do with King Charles?
I am telling you why he needs to apologise and pay reparations.
Why? What did he
It's
do?
not anything to do with slavery.
What did he do?
I'm telling you, colonialism, neocolonialism,
He didn't
racism,
do that.
racial disparities and a racist system and white supremacist attitudes. That is the legacies of the crown, slavery and colonialism that still remain to this day. Let me finally get my point across. Lord,
You've
need
got
to
your
let me
point
finish.
across, but here's my point, my counterpoint to you. What's any of that got to do with King Charles,
Okay, so I'll
who
explain.
actually has been, I think, one of the great standard bearers in royal history for actually promoting racial inequality and tackling racial injustice.
So let me
Yet you
explain.
want him to be issuing grovelling apologies for people hundreds of years ago, and you want him to pay money.
Okay, so I think black people would be far more inclined to get over it if it wasn't for the fact that the legacies of the crown, slavery and colonialism still remain, which includes racism, racial disparities and the racist global system of oppression and exploitation of black people. Which
All right, you're not answering my question.
I
Tessa.
am, but you don't want to accept it. That's a difference. That is a difference.
You haven't explained
You
what's-
also have the wealth
what's
of
that got to do
economic
with King
expansion
Charles?
as a result of exploitation of black people.
Let
And
Tessa-
you also have
let
rich
Tessa
global...
speak now.
Hold on. You haven't even let me finish, Piers. No problem. No problem. I've understood
You've
how you
done
do.
9/10 of the talking.
No, you didn't let me
Tessa,
finish. You didn't let me
you've
finish.
heard the debate.
I think you're both wrong, actually. On the one hand, we celebrate, and you certainly do, Piers, the idea of monarchy as continuity.
Yeah.
Going way back when. I mean, I read an article this week that traced the anointing oils to the Old Testament and King Solomon. You can't pick and choose which bits of that continuous historic line you like.
Yes, I can.
Well,
how is that
you,
that I'm
you
wrong?
can, but it's hugely,
But
it's
how is it that I'm
hugely
wrong? How is it that I'm
problematic.
wrong? What are you
And I
talking
would
about?
counter to you, where we have the face of history and the physical form of history in our royal family.
White
When,
supremacy,
when
that's what
for
I'm talking
example,
about.
France, the Republic, outlawed slavery much later, and in the civil wars in America,
you keep
that's what
talking
it took
about
in
slavery.
America,
Let me tell
much
you.
later. So
You
my
keep
point
talking
is, no,
about
two
slavery.
seconds. Let me finish my point.
You see,
Let
you
her
want to
finish.
interrupt, but you interrupted me several
let me
times,
finish
Piers. I
one
see
You
more
did all the
hypocrisy.
talking.
I see your hypocrisy right now. It's fine. I did all the talking.
I think what you do, what we're doing here is
Let
we're
her speak.
conflating an individual family with institutions of state. You can't expect a king to apologise. He doesn't have that power.
It's
He
about
would have
what
to
he
be
represents.
told to apologise
It's about what
by
he
the government
represents. He's already
because it's an
apologised,
institution of
Tessa, so I don't know what
state.
Do I have to? All right.
He's talked about sorry.
Excuse me.
He
Time
hasn't
out. Time
He
out.
hasn't actively apologised.
Time out.
In terms of slavery,
Time
hold on
out.
a second. You keep talking about slavery. Let's just be clear about slavery. Yes, you did end slavery. You've made that point and you've made that point, so let me address it. You did end slavery, and there was a clause in the contract that said, for example, that Jamaicans had to work up to 45 hours a week for the following 4 years, whilst you simultaneously paid off the slave owners and left the enslaved and their countries to rot. And then you transitioned to colonialism, where slavery still continued, and then you transitioned to the Commonwealth,
I agree.
where you continue to assert your dominance, exploit black people, and do it in a far
I
more dignified
agree,
way, while
Mark.
simultaneously...
I
This is
agree.
all-
But
But
it's
tell me
not
about
negative.
Tessa.
There are also...
Nobody's refuting.
Can we all stop talking?
Nobody's refuting the repugnance of that
Can we
period of
please
history.
time out? The biggest problem with slavery right now is there are between 7 to 10 million slaves in India. Last time I looked, that is not as a result of white supremacy. causing modern day slavery. I would rather we expend all our energy on current slavery issues than going back in the past, as we now do with. We now go back in the past for everything, wallowing in self-guilt about stuff that had nothing to do with us. Paul.
Yes. Legacies. You ignored that conveniently. Legacies of the crown slavery and colonialism. You ignored that conveniently.
This is such a negative. This is a
legacies going back how far? How far do you want to go back?
400 years black people have been constant.
Okay, so I want
them to do. I told you that.
So do you think the Vikings should be paying me money for what they did to me?
See, you're talking about slavery. I am not. I already explained.
I'm not talking about slavery.
I'm talking about colonialism.
You're not listening to me,
Neocolonialism, racism and racial disparities that still contend.
Stop shouting. You're not listening to what I said.
You're not listening to me.
Should the Vikings and the Romans also, through their modern-day ancestors, be paying me reparations for what they did to my family?
So I'm not talking about slavery, I'm talking about colonialism.
It's not slavery, you're not listening to me.
Yes, I am.
The Vikings and Romans didn't make us slaves.
No, yes, you're talking about the Roman Empire, which included
slavery. I'm talking about the Romans and the Vikings coming over here and causing immeasurable harm to my ancestors.
An empire and slavery.
Should Italians and Norwegians be paying me reparations?
In one sentence, Iman, in one sentence.
Go ahead.
What do you want? In one sentence, what's your idea?
Thank you, Tessa.
Money.
You want money?
You want money?
You want money?
Reparations.
Okay. Then I want money from the Vikings and the Romans. Paul,
I think
Paul, be very patient.
No, but the Commonwealth is a force for good.
Yes.
Commonwealth countries. Yes, it is. They do.
Absolutely.
They work for each other. It's a family, a community of families that help each other. That's why it was formed. And
no, you benefit more. That's why it's formed.
No, we don't benefit more. They benefit as well. They do benefit. Of course they do.
Paul.
Yes, they do.
Yes, I'm not saying that they don't. What I'm saying is that we benefit, you benefit, you benefit
Everyone
more.
benefits.
Exactly.
All right.
You benefit,
Iman,
you benefit, you benefit more. That's white supremacy.
Iman, how much money do you want from me?
That's what I keep talking about. Okay,
how much money do you want from me?
The National Commission on Reparations said that Jamaica, for example, is
how much do you want from me?
1.2 trillion.
How much do you want from me?
It's not about my feelings and not from you. I'm not. This isn't about me. And
we've all got to chip in, right? So how much do you want? How much money could I give you for something that had nothing to do with me, right?
That's why I want it.
How much money could I give you to make racism better? Nothing.
Keep ignoring that conveniently. We're talking about the legacies of the crown slavery and colonialism, which includes racism.
I don't know why you've come on deciding to speak like a robot today, but it's not really working.
Because you don't listen. That's why.
But nor does talking to me like that. Doesn't work.
Okay, well,
right?
how about listening?
But I will happily pay.
Listening?
If you could convince me that it will change racism one iota in this country, I will pay you a check for the damage inevitably that was done by my relatives when they weren't being attacked by Vikings and Romans. I will pay you reparations if I think you have any argument for why I should. And you know what? There isn't one.
Can I give you a response?
No, we've run out of time. That's it.
That's the point.
Guys, thank you all very much indeed.
Africa, being a continent that experienced significant colonization and exploitation, has indeed been affected by neocolonialism. Economic dependencies, unequal trade relations, and exploitation of natural resources are some of the ways neocolonial relationships persist. China may not have stepped a foot into Africa during the slave trade era, but China's increased presence and investment in Africa has become a topic of debate. While some argue that Chinese involvement provides economic opportunities and infrastructural development, others express concerns about the potential for exploitation and the consequences on local economies. Corruption within African governments is undoubtedly a major obstacle to progress and development. It hampers efforts to achieve true independence and economic self-sufficiency. It is important to note, however, that corrupt leaders exist in many parts of the world, and it is not exclusive to Africa. The existence of treaties and agreements between former colonial powers and their former African colonies further highlights the ongoing influence and control exercised by these former colonial powers. These agreements often prioritize the interests of the former colonizers, potentially hindering the economic and social development of the African nations involved. The situation with Niger and France regarding uranium exploitation illustrates the challenges faced by African nations in asserting control over their resources. The tensions between the Nigerian junta, France, and ECOWAS highlights the complexity of navigating relationships with former colonial powers and the struggle for the true independence and sovereignty. In conclusion, the transatlantic slave trade may have technically ended, but its effects, along with neocolonialism and other forms of exploitation, persist in Africa and other regions impacted by colonialism. Achieving through independence, economic self-sufficiency, and sovereignty requires addressing these underlying issues and ensuring fair and equitable relationships between nations. In the depths of history, a tale unfolds of a trade that brought darkness, of stories untold. Across the mighty oceans, lives were torn apart. A chapter stained in blood, etched in human hearts. Oh, the transatlantic slave trade, it grell and beat a storm, unleashing chains and suffering, forever to transform. But from the ashes rise, voices singing free, united against injustice, for all humanity. From Africa's shores, they were forced to part, torn from their families, broken from the start, in ships of despair, where hope was but a thread. They sailed towards the future, to a world unknown, so that ocean bloods, like mere commodities, treated like some property, stripped off their dignity. The cotton fields of sorrow, where dreams would wither, yet amidst the pain, their spirits rose like river. Oh, the transatlantic slave trade, it grell and beat a storm, unleashing chains and suffering, forever to transform. But from the ashes rise, voices singing free, united against injustice, for all humanity. Oh, the transatlantic slave trade, it grell and beat a storm, unleashing chains and suffering, forever to transform. But from the ashes rise, voices singing free, united against injustice, for all humanity.